so that would be, that's how we have the word degenerative arthritis or osteoarthritis. The bone is actually depositing into the areas where it should just be cartilage and glistening smooth tissue. All right. So this is what we're going to spend probably most of our time here.
Are those called bone spurs?
Yes, those would be called bone spurs. And so what happens, the reason we call them bone spurs is when we look at your x-ray, and usually this of your neck, for instance, you'll actually see a pokey thing going off of the bone. Well, understand, it's not just like a bone poking out like a rose thorn or something like that. It's actually the entire bone is splaying outwards because those two bones are essentially going to knit themselves together is what's going to try to happen. Because you see, if your body is pounding like this, then the body is going to deposit extra bone there. Now this would be true, let's say we start to exercise.
To try to strengthen.
To strengthen, yeah. So this is kind of a natural part of how your body adapts, right? Let's say we start weight training. Our body is going to lay extra calcium in the bones will become stronger. Now the problem is, if it's in a joint, see, we should probably talk, one of the things we'll talk about tonight is doing exercise. Well, my contention is if you have arthritis in some of your joints and then you start an exercise program, it may end up becoming very detrimental to you. You're trying to do something to improve you. You can end up creating a whole another set of problems. So we will talk about that a little bit more here. All right. But abnormal joint stress. So this would be, how does this degenerative arthritis unfold? Abnormal joint stress. So it could be a trauma. You might have been in a car accident 20 years ago. Or you could possibly have been hit with a helmet playing football and somebody spears you in the hip. Or you could have had, any number of things could happen to you. But something, essentially abnormal joint stress caused increased compressive forces in the joint, causes arthritic changes to form in the joint. And that's the body's attempt to shore up or stabilize this area that is now weak, that had trauma to it. So the body, it always tries to stiffen us up and hold us still. But that's not good for us. Our body should be flexible. We need to have mobility. This ultimately results in pain, immobilization, and the thickening of the capsule, and the tension of the capsule increases. So if you look around any joint, a movable joint has around it a nice capsule that holds all the lubricating fluid in. When you've had trauma and starting to deteriorate, not only do you get the disintegration of the cartilage itself lining the two surfaces of the joint, but that capsule that surrounds that joint also starts to constrict and tighten down. And it's just, this is why I can't move my finger. It's so sore when we get the rain coming in off the ocean. My joints swell and they're sore. And it's capsular swelling. It's really, really fascinating, all this stuff that happens. So is this you? So so when we say arthritis, does this sound like anybody you know? Stiff in the morning, stiff after periods of rest. So that means, let's say you've been
Get up to go to the bathroom.
yes, and you've been sitting for a while. That's right. Or let's say you go to church and you're sitting in the pew for an hour, and then you go to stand up and you go, oh, you have to kind of ease into it, right? So if you're finding these types of things, then pain that worsens with joint movement. So let's say you try to move your elbow or you try to move your knee or something. Oh man, I don't want to do that. And so this would be the sort of thing that you start to hold your arm here, because if you move your elbow, it really hurts, and so you stop moving your elbow so much. You start using the other arm, right? You see, this is how this all unfolds, and it's really deceptive and it's bad. Causing lots of function. So this is, I can't trust if I take something heavy in this arm, it might hurt me and I might drop it, so I stop doing it that way, so then I start using this, right? That sort of thing, yes. This is classic. Local tenderness. That's pain that you say, right here, Dr. Day, or that sort of thing. You could point and show me where it is. And a cracking joint. So this would be when you start to have noise, we call it crepitus, or the joints start to make noises now. It's a very unsettling sound when it's inside of you. Swelling of the soft tissue, so a lot of times and you can see, especially when we start talking about the hands, because you could see that, right? It looks like a sausage. You go, Dr. Day, look at that finger. It's different than these ones, that sort of thing. So
I have a big lump in both of my, I have like a bone like sticking up about this high in both my thumbs, Dr. Dave. Yeah. And I can't hardly move, they hurt so bad.
Yeah. So this would be an example then of an arthritic deterioration. We could take an x-ray, and what would we see? We probably would see deterioration. Now, the problem that I have though is, a lot of times if you go to the doctor and this one's sore, they say, oh, that's arthritis, that's why it's sore. Well, if they would have taken an x-ray of the good hand What do you think they might see there also? The one that doesn't hurt you.
Same thing.
You might have as much arthritis. In fact, a couple years ago, I took on a lady who was having such severe knee pain, they wanted to do knee surgery on her. So I asked for her records. And I looked at the x-rays, I'm going, wait a minute here, which knee was it? And the one that was giving her all the problems was, guess what? It was her right knee. But I looked at that, did they mislabel those? No, they didn't mislabel them. Her left knee looked far worse than her right knee, but which was the one that was sore?
Her right.
It was her right knee. So when I see this over and over, and it's really interesting to me. Now, the medical doctors would say, oh, you're going to need total knee replacements on both of them because it's just bad, right? Well, since I see this, I go, well, wait a minute here. If it were the arthritis, and that was the whole name of the game, why wouldn't her left knee be the one that's given? Why is it the right that's giving her all the problem? And her left, as far as she's concerned, her left is working just fine and doesn't hurt her, doesn't cause her any problems. And yet that's the one that's the real bad one.
Is she right-handed?
No, it's not. It's not a handedness issue. It's well, there's other. So I love the way you're thinking though, because that's where I had to go. I had to start thinking. Now, what are the things? Well, so we took X-rays with her standing because I had to assume. Well, we have X-rays of her knees. We know they're both shot, but this one is sore and this one isn't. But this one's a whole lot worse than this. What in heaven's name is going on? So we have to do a whole assessment. So when I took the X-rays, look at the ball and socket, look at the hips, look at the spine, look at the neck. You see, because what I'm starting to realize is it's much more complex than just saying, oh, it's all because you've got arthritis in your neck or in your back or wherever, in your knee. There are other things that contribute to whether it's painful and dysfunctional or not. So that's kind of what are the things that we can do. And so I'm finding that if we, instead of saying, oh, it's all your arthritis, that you have to learn to live with it, I say, what are the things that we could do? And things like giving a shim, a heel lift, or noticing that, you know what, your spine is out of balance there. If we were to shim that and bring balance to you, we might then be able to prevent arthritis, which would otherwise form down the road. We can actually prevent it by doing things or shim up. When we see there's a huge discrepancy, let's try to bring as much balance back to the body as we can. So osteoarthritis, the places that are vulnerable, your hips, your knees, your feet, and your spine. These are the bad. This would probably make sense for people. I would say a lot of people, we notice our hands, and even myself, I notice this joint in my hand. You know, because it's right here and it's what I use all the time. So it's what I worry about, right? Because I go, well, what if this joint starts to give me so much trouble that I'm going to have trouble adjusting, right? This is, so each one of us, wherever, like in your thumb, well, every time you go to grab something, you start worrying about, what happens if I drop something or go to grab something and it's going to hurt me?
I'm already doing it.
Yeah, and this is the problem that we end up having with arthritis, or problems in our joints, is we start to worry and then we start trying to do as many things as we're afraid of. So, so we need to do as much as we can. So decreased joint motions. Now chiropractors talk about this as if it's what we call a subluxation, or a misalignment of the spine. And if that's what's happening inside of you, until that's corrected, that really should be number one on our hit parade. It puts increased pressure and stress on the discs and the bones. That destroys the cartilage and the disc that's between them. So I look at things, people will talk to me, oh, I have a disc problem, and they think that going to have a surgeon cut out the disc or fuse that area is going to fix it. I go, well, let's try to salvage or save the disc by getting everything working better around it. Let's change the shape that's causing that disc to bulge and things like that. So that fibrosis and bone deterioration, and so this is where those bone spurs actually happen. The cartilage itself changes as the bone is deposited into those glistening joint surfaces, and it starts to function more like sandpaper. But we can take those gnarled joints, and if we can get them functioning better and getting lubrication back inside of those joints, even though it's like two surfaces of sandpaper, if we can get enough space that they're separated by the lubricating fluid and things like that, you can still have a terribly deteriorated hip or knee or finger, but it will function just fine